Hello, welcome to Calliope's Corner, the place where poets and songwriters meet. I'm Paula Kersey. Today we have a unique writer with us. His name is Eugene Michael Giudice. He's a senior research service training specialist from Chicago, Illinois. His professional background includes computer engineering and law librarianship. During the pandemic, when he began working from home, Eugene embarked on an expressive essay journal email writing campaign to friends and colleagues to encourage hope for the future. His book, Reflections During a Pandemic, Thoughts While Sheltering in Place, is the culmination of that work, a daily collection of inspirational and motivational messages Eugene calls Reflections. Today we have Eugene with us on Calliope's Corner. So grateful to have you here with us, Eugene. Welcome to Calliope's Corner.
I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your show and talk about this book.
Eugene, about the book, for those that don't know, it really is a collection or a compilation of emails. And it's so incredible to me because every essay has a quote in it. It runs the gambit from St. Thomas Aquinas to Auntie Mame. And there's one quote even in here by Langston Hughes. How did you come up with this idea?
The way the book came about was when it became apparent that we were all going to be working from home, sheltering in place for an extended period of time. My law firm, I work at Denton's and I work in the Chicago office. We had an all-staff, all-attorney conference call. Everybody in the U.S. was on this call. And our CEO at the time, Mike McNamara, he encouraged the attorneys. He said, talk to your clients, see how we can help them during this time. But don't just talk about business. Be concerned about them as human beings, because no doubt many of these clients were going to have troubles with things like childcare, education, elder care, working at home in what might be a chaotic household, etc. He said, reach them on a human, personal level. And then he gave people like myself a charge. He said, stay connected with each other, check in with each other, make sure everybody is okay, doing okay mentally, physically, that sort of thing. So what came about was these writings. I started with a small group, just the team that I'm on of about 20 people. And then it started to expand. And now the distribution is of about 300 are getting the emails on a regular basis. I won't say a daily basis, because the first year I was doing it 5 days a week. And after the first year, Paula, writing anything 5 days a week, man, it becomes a grind. So now I'm doing them like Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, and I'm still doing them. So this book represents the first year's writing. So from March 19th of 2020 to March 19th of 2021. But there's a whole other batch of stuff that hasn't been put in a book yet.
That whole human connection, that really does set the tone for the entire purpose of your emails, the outlook, of course, of your entire book. The concept of the book reminds me of something called morning pages. For my audience that's listening, that's a practice that was introduced by Julia Cameron in her book, The Artist's Way. It's the stream of consciousness of writing. You had said, Eugene, at first you did it every day and it was a grind. I think that's why Julia came up with this idea. Ideally, it's supposed to be done every morning. So part of when I started reading your essays and your emails, basically from the book, I thought, wow, he must have gotten up every morning with an idea. How did he process all this?
It wasn't stream of consciousness in the strictest sense or the most classic sense. What I would try to do is find something that happened in the world or that I had seen or that I had read that would act as sort of the hook for the day. And that's why the quotes are so important. And sometimes finding that hook was difficult. And sometimes the email didn't go out until 3-4 in the afternoon Chicago time. It's just a way to communicate a deeper meaning of things. If there was a holiday, sometimes the holiday itself would be the hook for that day's writing, or like that Friday's writing.
Can you please read one of your reflections?
Sure. I'm going to read the September 11th ones.
Please do. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Today is September 11th. This day cannot pass without some reflection on the terrible events that occurred 19 years ago. Much will be written, said, and posted on social media about those events today. It is good to reflect on the thoughts of a simple Franciscan friar who, according to the New York Medical Examiner, was victim one. If you descend into somebody else's private hell and stand there with them, it ceases to be hell. Father Michael Judge, who was chaplain of the New York City Fire Department. No doubt Father Judge descended, as Dante might put it, into hell on that September morning as he entered the towers. His life before September 11th dealt with a great deal of suffering and entering into other people's private hell. He had his own hell to deal with, having been a recovering alcoholic for over 20 years and struggling with his sexual orientation in a climate and community that was not as accepting as it should be. I think what Father Judge might want us to take from his life in this need to enter into somebody else's private hell, and maybe more importantly, the victory that can be gained from doing that. Every time we choose to enter somebody's private hell, we break the bonds of isolation, which is a hell in and of itself. Every time we allow somebody to enter our private hell, we begin to conquer that hell. It is the courage in ways both large and small, or as I often phrase it, the courage of the small hours that beckons to us to reach out and break the bonds of somebody's private hell. By constantly breaking those bonds, it will lead to a more inclusive, just, and compassionate society. Whose private hell will you be entering today? And standing with you in breaking bonds. Here's one that actually is not in the book, but it's a little bit later. But this gives you a sense of what the holiday sort of theme was. And this is from this year's Memorial Day time. So this was out on the 31st of May of this year. And it reads, "Good morning. It's Memorial Day here in the United States and the traditional start of the summer season. There will be ceremonies great and small in town squares and cemeteries all over this land, remembering with gratitude the service and sacrifice of so many that make it possible for people like me to write and express themselves. This day, my mind turns to one particular cemetery, Arlington National Cemetery. My mind turns to a day in November when another veteran was laid to rest on the green slopes of Arlington. On Monday, November 25th, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was buried there 3 short days after his assassination in Dallas, Texas. The day was full of somber ceremony, the muffled drums, the caisson with the flag-draped coffin, the riderless horse, a young widow in black, the salute of a tiny boy as his father's casket passed by. As befitting any veteran's funeral, taps were played. A young U.S. Army bugler rendered that salute, but not with perfection. One of the notes in that tune cracked. No doubt you can hear that recording on YouTube. The crack note summed up in its totality the anger and grief of a nation. You can read about the cracked note at a particular website. Not far from the Kennedy grave is the Tomb of the Unknowns. That will be the locus of remembrance today. As you look at that white marble tomb and its simple inscription, here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God. You will notice that a crack has developed in the tomb. There has been much discussion on what to do about that crack. What can we learn from a cracked note and a cracked monument? No doubt they are reminders of the work that must be done in this country, but I think it is instructive to reflect a little deeper. That young bugler did not stop when the one note cracked. He continued playing. The crack in the Tomb of the Unknowns does not prevent people from making the pilgrimage to Arlington and reflecting on sacrifice and service. I think that this may be the lesson for today, that no matter what cracks develop in our world, we are a people who, when brought together by great challenges, have the skills, gifts, and creativity to create a new society based on justice, compassion, and inclusion. We cannot let the many cracks that separate us remain a permanent part of who we are as a society. We must find a way to repair the cracks to continue the work of justice, compassion, and inclusion. What cracks will you be repairing today? Joined with you in remembering on this Memorial Day.
So in that piece, you did not really use a quote, but you
No.
used an event, a universal event that everyone should have understood and felt.
Yeah.
Talking about cracks in our society and cracks that have changed things. On May 25th, 2020, we all know George Perry Floyd was murdered by a police officer during that arrest. We know the whole story, the whole country, the whole world knows that story. You have several emails and essay selections that you dedicated to your thoughts on that. And I know that there was one that you wrote on May 31st, 2020. And you wrote that one the day after. You had said that earlier that you do not write on weekends. And this particular essay was sent out on a weekend. So it was very important. I'd like you to share it with us.
Sure. Good afternoon. I usually don't send these messages out on the weekend, but today I am bound in conscience because of the past few days' events to say something. And then I use the quotation, because I remember, I despair. Because I remember, I have the duty to reject despair. From Elie Wiesel. What started as a just and righteous expression of frustration, grief, anger, and mourning of the extrajudicial killing of Mr. Floyd was exploited by some and turned into a night of arson, looting, riots, and mayhem. These people of violence do not serve Mr. Floyd's memory. This has given me cause to consider other memories, what we remember, what we forget, and how we respond to what we choose to remember. Some will simply want to forget all these events. I am not sure that is helpful because if we forget history's lessons, we are doomed to repeat them. Some will want to remember, but then respond to those memories with more bitterness, anger, and despair. I don't think that will get us anywhere either. I think Mr. Wiesel gives us a third way. He is calling us to remember, but to use those memories as a catalyst to change our attitudes and engender hope. He may be calling us to use those memories to find somewhere deep inside each of us and to call upon what Lincoln referred to as the better angels of our nature. This task is not without risk and pain and cannot be accomplished without effort and recognition of others' goodwill. No person can change years of negative personal and institutional attitudes. We can, though, make small changes in which we have some influence. Maybe a lesson from nature would be helpful. Diamonds are made up of carbon atoms. It takes only one atom of some other element wedged in the structure of those millions of carbon atoms in that diamond to give it a different, often more rare color. Maybe we are called to be that one atom that adds color and more extraordinary brilliance to life, laboring with you in changing the color of diamonds.
I absolutely admire your closing salutation there. Laboring with you in the changing the color of diamonds. It's a great line.
And one of the things I always try to close with is before I sign my name, it's always laboring with or joined with. I'm always trying to use an action verb because what I'm trying to engender is not something that's passive. It's active.
It's participatory.
That's a great way of putting it. It's very participatory.
I'm going to call you the male Louise Hay
or Sarah Von Brennick.
They were the queens of daily positive affirmation like advice books back in the day. And that's what this book is. And that's what you are. You're the king of it. Yours is an expressive journal. The writing endeavor that you have has such therapeutic value. Your work is quite motivational. And you talk of finding service. You talk of using your talents, taking care of oneself, manifesting courage. And although you wrote this during a pandemic, these are all suggestions for a happy life in or out of quarantine. It doesn't matter that it was done during quarantine. When
you did this, you also came up with it. And there's another quote from the book, "Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier," by Colin Powell. How very motivational was that line? So perfect. So why the focus of hope? Why the focus of motivation? What motivates you to motivate others for hope and motivation?
I think one of the major problems during this pandemic is a general lack or a sense of hope. And that was one of the reasons I started doing these messages, was to communicate or inspire a sense of hope in others. And I go back to Elie Wiesel. When he speaks about hope, he gives us this quotation. So this is the writing from May 17th, 2020. Good morning, everyone. It's a snowy morning here in Chicago. Will spring ever truly arrive? It's been a tough week for many. We read in the press of job losses and cutbacks on all fronts, and maybe we are apt to lose faith and hope in each other. Here's something to consider. Hope is like peace. It's not a gift from God. It is a gift only we can give to one another. We hear a lot about hope and how it comes from within. But Mr. Wiesel turns that on its head. He says that we get hope from each other. Maybe that this is the thought for the weekend, that the hope we carry can be contagious. Let's face it, we all know a lot more about contagion than we did 6 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is our duty, for want of a better word, to carry and express hope, not so much for ourselves, but for the people we come in contact with. Hope may be the tremendous categorical imperative that Immanuel Kant speaks about, together with you in spreading hope.
This is Long Island's oldest non-commercial radio station, bringing you 24 hours of programming,
7 days a week, 365 days a year.
We are 88.7 FM WRHU,
Hempstead, and online at
WRHU.org.
the world.
Round the clock,
and around the planet.
This is Radio Hofstra University.
Welcome to Calliope's Corner. I'm Paula Kersey. We are talking to Eugene Michael Giudice. He is sharing his reflections from his book titled Reflections During a Pandemic, Thoughts While Sheltering in Place. I know that there are many times in the book too that you use metaphor. One line that you wrote, you said something like, not only can we add water to our own painting, but we have the opportunity to add to the paintings of those around us. You know, again, very constructive, very instructive, as well as caring. You're full of metaphor, moral suggestions. You refer to an anvil and a hammer and the work of a blacksmith, the art of making bread, gardening, all things of making and doing. How did that happen? How did you wind up using these references and sharing them?
I think the reason I use these metaphors of things done with the hands, because I wanted to honor the beauty of and dignity of working with hands. I mean, I work in what is called the knowledge economy. I'm a librarian, I'm a trainer. I don't get, the two paws too dirty very often. And so I wanted to honor work, but it was also an attempt to create an analogy between the message that I'm trying to send and something that would be common in people's experiences, like cooking, gardening, basic carpentry, something that would act as a bridge to get the message through.
You have a message. It was your 100th message. I think it was on August 6, 2020, that does do a great job of explaining this use of metaphor. Would you share that one with us?
Please, yes. Good morning. Let's have one more day with bread. Why not? The art of bread making can become a consuming hobby. And no matter how often and how many kinds of bread one has made, there always seems to be something new to learn. That's from Julia Child. For better or for worse, this is the 100th message that I have put out. I hope people are still finding value, comfort, and some food for thought from them. I think what Mrs. Child said about bread applies equally to life. This pandemic response and social change have caused many, read me, to rethink old positions and ways of thinking. I would like to think that this time we have all grown in some way. The question now becomes, what will we do with these new learnings and ways of thinking? To continue with the bread analogy, every day is a chance to make a fresh loaf of bread, another opportunity to integrate what we have learned in yesterday's baking to improve today's baking. We don't have the same loaf every day. Some days we may want a light sandwich loaf. Another day we may want a crusty French bread. How are we going to break and share the bread we bake with others? How will we take what we have learned, either in baking or in life, to create a society based on justice, compassion, and inclusion, where everyone's life and the loaf of bread that they bring is celebrated? Maybe it's been good that we have been lingering in the bakery with the bread, metaphorically, the past few days, because it harkens to some of the basic life activities, being at table and sharing the good things of the earth and the labors of our hands. In other words, there's being family to each other. How will you improve the loaf you bake today? Joined with you in breaking bread.
Awesome. I so much appreciate the ending with a question because it leaves the reader to say, I really should think about this. This is something I should investigate. I should introspect a little bit more. And you've taken such an effort in examining the daily impact of 2020 and 2021 on your life and how it affected so many other people. Your book is a great tool, I think, for anyone that's into journal writing, into assisting bibliotherapy. I don't know anyone that would not find your book to be a happy one under such traumatic circumstances.
This is your What's the Buzz Minute, and I'm Paula Kersey. You know, as we move through fall and into winter, many of us are going to be returning to full-time work, and that means many of us will be using public transportation more often. Reality is, we're going to be coming into contact with a lot more people. COVID is not gone, and changes are inevitable. It may be awkward as we move into this next new phase, and that's why we need to be more patient and conscious of our own and others' personal boundaries and continued personal care. For example, it's totally okay if you don't shake someone's hand and just say hi. And seriously okay to break out your pocket sanitizer if you do. So if someone you know or you are experiencing any return to work or re-entry anxiety, call the New York State COVID-19 Emotional Support Hotline at 1-844-863-9314. And for our Illinois listeners today, there is a 24-hour call for calm hotline. Text the word TALK, T-A-L-K, to 552020. You've been listening to Calliope's Corner, the place where poets and songwriters meet on WRHU, 88.7 FM, Radio Hofstra University. This has been your What's the Buzz Minute, and I'm Paula Kersey.
We're at Calliope's Corner. I'm Paula Kersey. We're talking to Eugene Michael Giudice, author of Reflections During a Pandemic, Thoughts While Sheltering in Place.
So, Eugene, this is going to be a two-parter question. First, how has the pandemic changed you, this act of writing all of these emails? And what advice might you give for us in this post-pandemic future that we're all traveling through?
Oh, I have to think about that. I'm not so certain we're moving into a post-pandemic world yet. The Delta variant numbers here in Illinois are on the rise, and that's why I'm still doing them. I was thinking of turning this project off. That's not happening. I think through this year and the writing of this book has been a real sea change for me. I myself find myself being more patient, or trying to be more patient about the things that maybe a year or two ago I'd get tied up in all kinds of knots. I'm not saying I'm not there yet, but I'm on the road. And I think this book has also caused me to really think about living out what I exhort others to do in this book. I mean, I would be a class number one hypocrite if I just wrote these things and didn't do my best to live up to them. especially in the areas of justice, compassion, and inclusion. I use that phrase all the time, and I think the advice that I would give everyone as we move to a post-pandemic world, as we see the setback caused by the Delta variant, and I heard one of my colleagues mention that there's like a new variant in the offing, so I don't know what that's all about. The advice that I would give is to seek ways, even small ways, to be more just, to be more compassionate, to be more inclusive. There's one quote that actually didn't make it into this book, and it's again from Julia Child. She says, "Someday, someone may offer you a freshly caught whole fish, like a large salmon or a striped bass. Don't panic, take it. Every day is like that. Don't panic, just take it." I'm not naive enough to think this will be the last pandemic we'll ever see. But maybe what I have written here will be one more tool for people to have for the next time. And if I may add something else, I did a book signing at the local diner, and one of the people that came is he happens to be the county assessor for Cook County, and I got to know him, and his father was a classics professor at University of Chicago. So this is a person that grew up with words and thoughts, and he spoke about this book as sort of the first cut of history. I'm hoping that long after I'm gone and forgotten, someone will find this and use it as a window to what thoughts and life was like during this time. And one of the other reasons I wrote this, or I was doing this, was there's a fairly famous poster from the First World War where there's a man, middle-aged, with his children around, sitting on his lap, and the child asked, "Daddy, what did you do in the Great War?" And you can see from the look on the man's face that he didn't do very much. So this is my effort at doing maybe a little more than not much.
It's your legacy.
Yeah, I'd like to think of that the way.
I'm going to choose one of the quotes that you wrote about from Margaret Mead. She said, "A small group of thoughtful people could change the world." So I'm going to honor you by telling you that I think that you're one of those people, Eugene, because what you've done here is amazing. You've gone out of your way to keep your colleagues together, even if it started out with a group of 20, now it's a group of 300, and you've written this book, and it can be anyone that wants to buy the book. I thank you for sharing this positive journal, your journey of expressive reflections, and I'm just so glad you've unpacked your thoughts. You've introspected, you've taught others. Small quote, dignity does matter. And that's what you've done here with this book, provided people with an opportunity to feel dignified. So thank you so much for being with us here on Calliope's Corner. I appreciate your time and amazing effort.
It's my pleasure. That was wonderful.
Those of you that want to reach out and purchase Reflections During a Pandemic, Thoughts While Sheltering in Place, it's available on both Amazon and the Barnes & Noble's websites in both ebook and print on demand formats. Thanks for being with us here at Calliope's Corner. Bye for now.